Police sirens keened through a small Arizona suburb. Red and blue lights washed across window glass just as the first gray of dawn bled over the rooftops. A cluster of officers circled an old man with white hair. His hands trembled around a battered camera. On the tiny screen glowed a fresh morning photograph. Not only clouds and light, but something too crisp to dismiss. A colossal black, triangular silhouette hanging in the air as if it did not belong to this world. You're telling us this has been appearing for days? The police chief asked, voice snagged between doubt and alarm. The old man gripped the camera, eyes fixed. I've been tracking it for a long time, and today, it's clearer than ever. The desert has its own kind of silence. It's not empty. It's full of whispers, the creak of wooden fences, the rustle of mesquite leaves, the faint hum of power lines stretching across a horizon so wide it could swallow a man's grief whole. But Walter Green had learned, after 72 years, that silence doesn't cure loneliness. It amplifies it. Every morning, well before dawn, Walter woke to the sound of his own breath, echoing in the small, timber-framed house on the edge of the Arizona scrubland. He lived alone now. His wife, Eleanor, had been gone for more than a decade, and his children, grown, busy, absent, lived states away, orbiting their own families and obligations. The house, once bustling with arguments about homework and the clatter of Eleanor's cooking pans, had become a shrine of dust and photographs. But Walter still had his ritual. He brewed his coffee in the chipped percolator Eleanor had insisted on keeping, even when the world moved on to sleeker, faster machines. The smell of burnt grounds filled the kitchen, mingling with desert air that crept through the screen door. By 5:00 a.m., he would step out onto the porch, camera slung around his neck, the world still drenched in twilight. Click. The first photograph of the day was always before the sun showed itself. The sky at that hour was a canvas of gradients, indigo giving way to violet, then to a pale blue that looked as if it had been brushed on with trembling hands. Walter would lift his battered camera, an old Nikon Eleanor had given him decades earlier, paired with the 85mm lens she had wrapped in comic paper for his birthday, and point it east toward the promise of light. He did this not out of habit, but out of devotion. It had been Eleanor's last request, whispered to him from a hospital bed, her voice thin but steady. Bring home one beautiful thing from each morning, she had said. Collect them like beads. When my voice fades, those will speak for me. And so he did. His neighbors thought of him as the eccentric widower with a camera. The kids who biked past his house on their way to school would joke that he was photographing aliens or waiting for angels. Walter didn't mind. Let them laugh. They couldn't know how each photograph was a conversation with someone who wasn't there anymore. But not all laughter was cruel. Young Lucas, the boy 2 houses down, had a telescope with a cracked lens he'd picked up at a garage sale. Sometimes, Lucas would pad up Walter's porch steps at dawn, barefoot and curious, watching as the old man adjusted aperture and focus. "Why's the sky dishier up there than down here?" Lucas asked once, pointing a finger upward. "Because light has to travel farther through the air at the horizon," Walter answered. "Are clouds heavy? Heavier than you think, but they float because air below pushes them up. Can a picture here?" That last one made Walter smile, the lines around his mouth deepening. Maybe not. But sometimes, if you look long enough, a picture answers questions you didn't know you were asking. It was on one of those mornings, after Lucas had gone back to bed and the desert seemed to breathe alone again, that Walter first noticed the anomaly. He had taken his usual shots: wide sky, thin clouds, a hawk cutting across the horizon. But when he flipped through the digital screen, there it was, something that didn't belong. At the very edge of the frame, nearly swallowed by a shadow, was a wedge of darkness. It wasn't a cloud. Clouds had texture, motion. This was geometric, a sharp-angled triangle that defied the organic softness of dawn. Walter frowned. He blamed the lens. Dust, a scratch, maybe a sensor artifact. He cleaned it, reshot, dismissed it. But the next morning, it was there again. And the morning after that. Sometimes faint, sometimes clearer, but always in the same place on the horizon. At first, he told himself it was nothing. His photographer's mind, trained during years of war reporting, knew the tricks of light. Smoke plumes disguised as mountains, shadows lengthened into phantoms. But something about this triangle tugged at him. It was too deliberate. So he began to log it. Walter pulled out an old ledger book and started noting details: date, time, direction, exposure settings, weather. He tracked wind speed and barometric pressure from the radio. He wrote careful notes beside each photograph. Faint outline, 5:12 a.m., East Ridge. Or clearer today, 5:09 a.m., cloudless sky. The anomaly became less an accident and more a pattern. Days stretched into weeks. Walter tried different cameras. On his modern digital, the triangle never appeared. On his cheap backup DSLR, nothing. But when he used Eleanor's old 85mm lens, the one with her initials faintly etched inside, the shape always returned. The realization sent a chill through him. The lens wasn't just old glass. It was something else. Something Eleanor had left him, maybe without meaning to. The discovery both terrified and exhilarated him. At night, he would sit by the dining table, ledger spread open, photographs laid out like tarot cards. He studied them until his eyes watered, tracing the migration of the shadow, the subtle changes in position. It wasn't random. The thing, whatever it was moving. And it was moving with intent. Walter thought about telling someone, but the idea of being laughed at again, this time not by children, but by adults with patronizing smiles, froze the words in his throat. Instead, he kept silent, the secret tightening in his chest like a knot. One evening, while sorting through prints, he paused at a photo of Eleanor from years ago. She was in her workshop smock, safety goggles pushed up, hair frizzed from a day polishing glass. Behind her was a half-polished lens on the bench. Walter leaned closer, noticing faint etchings along its rim. Markings he had seen on his own lens but never paid attention to. A symbol like a split arrowhead. It made him wonder, had Eleanor known? Had she worked on something beyond ordinary optics? Had she, in her quiet way, left him a key to a truth too large to grasp? The desert offered no answers, only more silence. The next morning, Walter stepped onto the porch as usual, but this time, his hands shook with a different kind of anticipation. He fitted the 85mm lens, pointed toward the horizon, and waited. When the shape had appeared again, darker than ever before, he pressed the shutter and whispered aloud, "What are you?" The camera clicked, capturing not just the light, but the beginning of a secret he could no longer ignore. Walter's kitchen table looked less like a dining space and more like the operations desk of an amateur detective. Photographs lay scattered in overlapping rows, a timeline of skies stitched together with the patience of grief. In the center sat his battered ledger, its ruled pages filling with dates, arrows, and shorthand only he could decipher. It was on a Sunday evening, the desert still radiating the heat it had swallowed all day, when Walter finally admitted to himself that he needed another mind on this. His own was too weathered by solitude, too weighted by memories of Eleanor, to carry it alone. He thought of the boy, Lucas, with his yard sale telescope, but the child's curiosity, while refreshing, was too fragile for this. No, he needed someone who understood the science of light, someone who wouldn't laugh. That's when he thought of Maya Patel. Meeting Maya was known around town as the young physics lecturer at the community college, mid-30s, sharp-eyed, and perpetually juggling too many roles. She taught lab classes that most students took reluctantly, advised the astronomy club in her spare time, and occasionally gave public talks at the library about meteor showers and eclipses. Walter had attended one of those talks months ago, sitting in the back row. He remembered her pointing to a slide of the Perseid meteor shower, explaining how the streaks of light weren't stars falling, but dust and ice burning in the atmosphere. Her enthusiasm had been contagious. She reminded him of Eleanor, precise, careful with words, but able to lift science into poetry when she wanted to. So the next morning, with his latest photographs tucked in an envelope, Walter drove his rusted Ford pickup to the campus. The parking lot was mostly empty, classes on break, but through the window of the lab, he saw her, hair tied back, goggles perched on her forehead, bending over a circuit board with a soldering iron. He knocked. Maya looked up, startled. Then her expression softened. "Mr. Green, right? You came to one of my talks." Walter nodded. I need your help with something. Something I can't explain." The first test, she cleared a space on the lab table, and Walter spread out the photographs like a gambler revealing cards. At first, Maya flipped through them politely, murmuring appreciation at the colors of dawn. Then she froze. She had stopped on one of the sharper images, the triangular shadow etched against a pale sky. Her brows knit. "What's this?" "That," Walter said, voice steady despite his heart's thrum, "is what keeps showing up, only with this lens." He lifted the Nikon with Eleanor's 85mm attached and set it gently before her. Maya leaned close, inspecting the lens under the fluorescent light. The brass barrel was worn smooth from decades of use. She tilted it, watching how the glass caught reflections. Then she saw the faint engraving on the inner rim. Initials, a date, and that odd arrowhead symbol split by a line. "Where did you get this?" she asked quietly. "My wife gave it to me long time ago. She worked at Palo Verde Optical before she passed." Maya nodded slowly. That shop had contracts with research labs, high-precision optics, maybe more than just cameras. She straightened and looked him in the eye. "Let's falsify this. If it's a real object, it should show up regardless of the camera. If it's the lens, we'll know. Experiments." For the next week, they tested. At dawn, Maya joined Walter on his porch, sometimes bleary-eyed, but always armed with gear. She brought her sleek mirrorless camera, a newer DSLR, even an old 35mm film body from the Astronomy Club's stash. Day 1. With Maya's digital, nothing. With Walter's backup, nothing. With the old 85mm, there it was. Faint, but undeniable. Day 2, same results. Day 3, clouds masked the horizon. But through Eleanor's lens, the triangular outline bled through anyway, darker than the clouds themselves. Maya documented everything, just as Walter had, filling her own notebook with angles and timestamps. She frowned at her images, then at his. "This isn't an artifact," she said finally, spreading the prints side by side. "It's consistent, it's directional, and it's only visible through this one piece of glass." Walter said nothing, just traced the symbol etched on the lens with his thumb. Eleanor's hand. One evening after their session, Maya asked if she could see more of Eleanor's things. Walter hesitated, then invited her inside. The house smelled faintly of cedar and old books. On the mantel were photographs of Eleanor, laughing in her garden, squinting in workshop goggles, standing at a desert overlook with hair blown wild. Maya noticed a box on the shelf labeled E's Notes. Inside were scraps of paper, sketches, and equations. Walter admitted he had never understood them. Maya sifted through until she paused at a postcard. On it, Eleanor had written in neat block letters, "Active camouflage is only as honest as the light that meets it." Bishop was a crude sketch of overlapping layers, labeled not with measurements, but with words: bend, delay, peel. Maya whispered, "Metamaterials, or at least an early version. Your wife might have been working on optical coatings that manipulate light in unusual ways." She tapped the lens on the table. "This could be a prototype, maybe even unique." Walter felt a swell of pride and sorrow at once. Eleanor's fingerprints were still on his mornings, guiding him even now. The realization, over the following days, patterns emerged. The object, or whatever it was, appeared in the same sector of sky, moving gradually along the ridge. Its position shifted predictably, almost like it followed a schedule. "This isn't random," Maya said. "It's systematic, almost like it's patrolling." Walter's jaw tightened. "And hiding, yes, camouflaged. But for some reason, this lens disrupts it, reveals it." She set the lens down carefully, as if it were fragile, not just in glass, but in truth. "Mr. Green, I think you're seeing something you were never meant to see." Transition toward conflict. Walter looked at her, weary but unflinching. "Then what do we do with it?" Maya hesitated. "If we publish, we could be ignored. Or worse. But if we keep it quiet..." She trailed off, unsettled by the weight of secrecy. Walter remembered the two faint figures he thought he saw in one of the most recent photos, blurred near the edge of the triangle. His chest tightened with the question he hadn't dared say aloud. Were they machines, or something else entirely? As silence filled the lab, the hum of fluorescent lights seemed suddenly loud. Walter knew the next step would draw them deeper, into territory neither of them could retreat from. The knock on the door came at dusk. Walter had just finished arranging the latest series of photographs across his dining table, each print like a confession the sky had reluctantly given up. Maya was still there, bent over her notebook, muttering calculations under her breath. Outside, the desert sun was bleeding into shades of crimson and violet, the kind of beauty that once would have made Walter's heart ache in the best way. Tonight, though, the color only unsettled him. The knock was measured. 3 raps, deliberate, not neighborly. Walter stiffened. Visitors were rare. Visitors at dusk, rarer still. Maya looked up. "Expecting anyone?" "No," Walter said. He pushed himself up from his chair, joints protesting, and shuffled to the door. 2 men stood on the porch. They wore plain suits, the kind that pretended not to be uniforms. Their ties were too tight, their shoes too polished for desert dust. They looked like bureaucrats, but their eyes were scanning, assessing, cataloging. "Mr. Green?" the taller one asked, his tone politely flat. Walter nodded, cautiously. "We represent a regional safety partnership," the man continued. "We've been informed you may have unusual photographs. We'd like to take a look, to ensure no one misinterprets what they might see." The other man smiled without warmth. Sometimes what looks alarming is just a trick of the lens. Walter felt Maya shift behind him, her presence like a small anchor. He cleared his throat. "If you're worried about my eyesight, gentlemen, you can save yourselves the trouble. I know what I've seen." The taller man tilted his head, gaze landing briefly on the camera still hanging by Walter's side. "Then perhaps you'll allow us to examine the equipment, just to put everyone's mind at ease." Walter's war instincts, honed decades earlier when photographing battlefields, stirred awake. The request was too casual, too rehearsed. Their politeness was a blade sheathed in velvet. "No," Walter said, steady as stone. "You may not." The taller man didn't flinch, but the air tightened around him. He reached into his jacket and produced a business card, except it wasn't really a card, just a slip of white with a phone number. No name, no agency, no logo. "If you change your mind," he said, laying it on the porch rail, "we'd appreciate a call. Sometimes secrecy protects people. Sometimes it protects the wrong things." Then, both men turned in unison, walked to a nondescript SUV idling at the curb, and drove away without headlights until they reached the main road. The weight of secrets. Inside, Maya exhaled sharply. "Regional safety partnership?" she scoffed. "That's not even a real phrase." Walter sat heavily, staring at the slip of paper. His fingers twitched, wanting to rip it, but he set it down instead. "They know," he murmured, "about the photos, about the lens." Maya rubbed her temples. "This proves it then. Whatever we're seeing, it's not natural, and somebody doesn't want it seen." Walter's mind turned reluctantly to Eleanor, to her years at Palo Verde Optical, polishing glass with a precision that went beyond craft, to the strange equations he had never understood, to that arrowhead symbol engraved on the lens. Had she known? Had she been part of something larger, something cloaked in secrecy, and had she, intentionally or not, left him the key to unmask it? He stood, restless, and walked to the mantel where a photograph of Eleanor in her workshop smock still stood in a simple frame. She was younger there, hair tied back, goggles pushed to her forehead, smiling at the camera as if secrets didn't weigh on her at all. Walter whispered to the photograph, "What did you give me, Ellie?" Digging into Eleanor's past. Over the next few days, Walter and Maya dug deeper. They sifted through the box of Eleanor's notes again. Among the grocery lists and doodles were more fragments, diagrams of layered glass, annotations written not with numbers but with verbs. Bend, delay, peel. Maya grew more convinced. These aren't just optics notes. These are about manipulating light itself. Early metamaterial research, maybe. If Eleanor was involved, she was ahead of her time. Walter shook his head slowly. She never told me. Maybe she wasn't allowed to, Maya said gently. Or maybe she wanted to protect you. The thought stung. Eleanor had always been honest, open, his partner in everything. But what if she had carried this burden silently? What if she had known her lens might one day reveal something hidden in the skies? The surveillance. It wasn't just the men at the door. Walter soon noticed the SUV parked 2 blocks down. Some mornings, windows tinted too dark. When he walked to the grocery store, he felt eyes on him. Once, late at night, a drone buzzed faintly overhead, just at the edge of hearing, then vanished into the desert darkness. Maya urged caution. We should stop photographing. Lay low until we figure out who they are. But Walter couldn't. His ritual had been Eleanor's request, her legacy. And now, it was more than memory. It was truth, waiting to be revealed. So he kept clicking. Each morning, the 85mm lens pulling secrets from the sky. And each morning, the triangle grew clearer. The breaking point. One morning, the object filled nearly half the frame. No longer a faint shadow. It was crisp against the dawn. Massive, triangular, its edges glowing faintly as if the air itself bent to conceal it. And at the bottom of the frame, something else. A streak of light arcing downward as though a fragment had detached and plummeted toward the forested ridge miles away. Walter's breath caught. He printed the photo, hands trembling. It's moving closer, he told Maya, or coming lower. Maya stared, wide-eyed. That looks like a descent. If that's true, it could leave evidence, physical evidence. Walter felt the weight of decision pressing down. He could stay silent, let the men in suits bury the truth, or he could act. He thought of Eleanor's etched words, "Don't let them hide too well." That night, Walter barely slept. He dreamed of sirens, of flashing lights, of Eleanor's voice whispering that beauty and truth were the same thing seen from different altitudes. By morning, he knew. He would go to the sheriff. The sheriff's office in Red Mesa County was a squat brick building that looked more like a forgotten post office than a center of authority. A single flag swayed limply outside, its edges frayed from desert wind. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old coffee and copier toner. Walter had been in this building before, renewing his driver's license, paying property taxes, but never for anything that made his pulse hammer the way it did now. Maya walked beside him, clutching the envelope of photographs. At the front desk, a deputy in a starched uniform looked up. He was young, probably fresh from the academy, and his skeptical glance made Walter brace himself. "Can I help you folks?" Walter cleared his throat. "We need to see Sheriff Delgado. It's urgent." The deputy raised an eyebrow, but after a pause, nodded and disappeared into the back. Minutes later, Sheriff Anna Delgado emerged. She was in her 50s, with dark hair streaked silver and a face carved by both laughter and loss. Walter knew her reputation, pragmatic, unshaken, not one for wild stories. "Mr. Green," she said evenly, "what brings you in today?" Walter gestured toward Maya. She slid the photographs onto the counter. "This," she said simply. The evidence. Delgado flipped through the prints. At first her expression didn't change, just polite attentiveness. Then she reached the latest image, the one showing the triangular craft sharp against the dawn, with the streak of light plunging toward the forest ridge. Her lips tightened. "What am I looking at here?" Walter leaned in. "Something that's been in our skies, hidden, only visible through this lens." He lifted Eleanor's 85mm from his bag, resting it on the counter like an artifact. "And yesterday, I captured this, something descending into the gulch." The sheriff studied the photo again, then looked at him with measured caution. "You're saying you have proof of... what? UFOs?" "I don't know what it is," Walter admitted. "But it's not nothing. And if it came down in those woods, someone needs to see it." Maya added, "This isn't a joke, Sheriff. I've verified his work. Whatever it is, it's systematic. It's real." For a long moment, silence stretched. Then Delgado nodded, curtly. "Fine, let's check it out." She turned to her deputy. "Get 2 units ready. We're heading to Juniper Gulch." The Discovery. The convoy of vehicles crawled up the dirt road, tires crunching over gravel. Walter rode in the back of the sheriff's SUV, watching the landscape roll by. The red cliffs, the ragged scrub, the horizon bleeding into sky. Maya sat beside him, silent, hands clasped tight around her notebook. They reached the gulch as storm clouds gathered overhead. The deputies fanned out cautiously, flashlights cutting through the dim light beneath the trees. "Here," one called. Everyone hurried toward the voice. In a small clearing, the earth was scorched in perfect circles, each about 10 feet wide. The grass and shrubs within were burned to ash, but the surrounding brush was untouched. Walter crouched, touching the soil. It was warm, faintly glassy, as if lightning had struck, but in a pattern far too deliberate. Deputy Ruiz whistled low. "Never seen burns like this." Maya knelt, running her fingers over the fused ground. "This isn't wildfire," she said firmly. "It's directed, like microwave energy, focused into spots." She picked up a handful of tiny, glassy beads scattered across the ash. "Look at this." Sand melted into glass. But it didn't explode. It mapped. Sheriff Delgado frowned. "Mapped? Yes. If you connected the circles, they'd form a grid. This is measurement, not destruction." Walter's gaze swept the clearing. He felt the echo of Eleanor's notes in his head. Bend, delay, peel. She hadn't been designing weapons. She had been designing eyes. Suddenly, a low hum vibrated in the distance, so faint it was almost mistaken for thunder. Everyone froze. Then, headlights appeared on the road. The confrontation. The black SUV rolled into the clearing, silent but deliberate. Walter's stomach dropped. It was the same vehicle, the same men in suits who had stood on his porch. The sheriff's hand went to her holster instinctively, though she didn't draw. The taller man stepped out first, expression unreadable. "This is a restricted area," he said calmly. "We need you all to leave." Sheriff Delgado squared her shoulders. "Restricted by who? Last I checked, this county answers to its people, not unmarked cars." The man's gaze flicked briefly toward Walter and the camera hanging at his side. "Sheriff, I respect your duty, but this is beyond your jurisdiction. For everyone's safety, it's best you stand down." "Safety?" Delgado shot back. "Burn circles in my forest don't scream safety." The shorter man approached, holding up a folder. "We're conducting classified wildfire prevention research. The burns are controlled experiments, nothing more." Maya's laugh cut sharp through the clearing. "Controlled? With cloaked aircraft? With technology that bends light itself? That's not wildfire prevention, that's secrecy." The taller man's eyes hardened. "Miss Patel, some knowledge destabilizes more than it protects. The public isn't ready." Walter's voice cracked like dry wood, louder than he expected. "Don't talk to me about what people are ready for. My wife polished the glass you're hiding behind. She gave me the lens that reveals you, and she believed truth deserved daylight." For the first time, the man faltered. He glanced at the lens Walter held up, recognition flickering in his eyes. "Eleanor Green, he said quietly. Walter froze. Hearing her name in a stranger's mouth was like a knife. "You knew her?" "She was part of the early team," the man admitted. "She insisted there had to be an outside check, a conscience in the loop. That lens was her insurance." The words struck Walter with the force of a blow. Eleanor had known. She had left him not just a gift, but a responsibility. The sheriff's stand. Delgado stepped forward, her hand no longer hovering near her gun, but firm on her belt. "I don't care what projects you're running. This is my county. These people deserve answers. You can't erase evidence, and you sure as hell can't intimidate citizens for doing the right thing." The taller man exhaled slowly, then gestured toward his SUV. "We'll be in touch." And just like that, they left, swallowed by the storm-dark horizon. Aftermath. Rain began to fall, hissing as it struck the scorched earth. Walter tilted his face upward, droplets blurring his vision. Maya stood beside him, clutching the beads of fused glass as if they were treasure. Sheriff Delgado looked at them both. "You've stirred something big, and it's not going away. But if what you say is true, if your wife left you this lens to hold them accountable, then maybe this is exactly where the truth belongs." Walter nodded, though his chest felt heavy with both pride and dread. He knew the men in suits would return, and next time they wouldn't be satisfied with politeness. Rumors travel faster than wind in a small town. By the time Walter woke the next morning, word of strange burns in Juniper Gulch had already spread through Red Mesa. At the diner, truckers leaned over coffee cups, whispering about government experiments. Kids at the gas station pointed at the sky, daring each other to look long enough to see a shadow. The librarian told a patron she'd heard the sheriff herself had gone out to investigate. Walter hadn't meant for it to spread. He had only shown the sheriff, only confided in Maya. But secrets in the desert were like water poured onto dry sand. They seeped outward until every grain felt damp, and with the rumors came the watchers. The black SUV appeared more often now, sometimes parked brazenly on the street, across from Walter's house, sometimes gliding slowly down the road at night with its lights off. Inside his home, Walter spreaded the photographs across the table once again. His hands lingered on the most recent print, the one that made his stomach twist each time he looked. The triangular craft was sharp now, no longer a rumor in pixels. Along one side, a row of faint glowing ovals, like windows, And behind those windows, darker shapes, not shadows of clouds, not tricks of the lens. They looked like figures. The burden of truth. Maya arrived just after dawn, hair tied back, eyes hollow from lack of sleep. She had been running simulations, trying to model the burn patterns they'd found in the forest. "Walter," she said, as she walked in, "if this is mapping fuel loads, then the technology is decades ahead of anything public. Whoever built that craft, it's like they're scanning the land before it burns. Preemptive firefighting at a level we can't even dream of." Walter handed her the photo. "Look closer. At the windows." She froze, bending over the print. Then her breath caught. "Oh my God." "People," Walter whispered, "or something like them." Maya looked up sharply. "You think it's not human?" "I don't know what to think." Walter sank into his chair, rubbing his temples. "But Eleanor's lens, she made it so I could see this. Maybe she knew it wasn't just about machines." Maya studied him, sympathy mixing with fear. "If this leaks, people will panic. Aliens or not, the mere suggestion will spiral, and the men in suits, they won't let this get out." As if summoned by her words, a knock rattled the door. Pressure. Sheriff Delgado stood on the porch, hat in her hands. She stepped inside without ceremony. "They came to me," she said grimly. "Your men in suits. Aerodyne, that's who they're with. They admitted there's a project, but they won't tell me who funds it. They want me to stop investigating." Maya folded her arms. "And are you going to?" Delgado's eyes hardened. "Not a chance. I swore an oath to protect this county. That includes the truth. But I need to know, what exactly are we sitting on here? Because if it's aliens, if it's weapons, if it's anything that could endanger my people, I have to prepare." Walter slid the photograph toward her. "This is what the sky is hiding." Delgado stared. Her face didn't flinch, but her knuckles whitened on the edge of the table. "Figures," she murmured. "Inside the damn thing." The three of them sat in silence, the weight of it pressing down like desert heat before a storm. The moral divide that evening. The three gathered again, their conversation turning from evidence to ethics. "If these are people," Delgado said slowly, "then Aerodyne has built a cloaked aircraft and is putting pilots inside. Dangerous, yes, but human." "But if they're not people," Maya counters, "if they're something else, then Eleanor's lens has revealed more than a government program. It's exposed contact." Walter stared at Eleanor's initials on the lens barrel. Ellie wanted accountability. She wanted someone outside the system to keep watch. That's me. But what good is truth if it burns the world down when you speak it? Maya looked at him fiercely. "Truth isn't yours to hoard. If this technology can stop wildfires, people deserve to know. And if those figures aren't human, then hiding it won't make them any less real." Delgado leaned back, sighing. "I've seen panic before. People will riot over empty gas stations. Imagine what they'll do over aliens in their sky. We have to be careful." The room was thick with conflict. Walter felt the knot of Eleanor's last request tighten around him. Bring home one beautiful thing from each morning. But what if the beautiful thing was also dangerous? A sign in the sky. The next morning, Walter returned to his porch alone. He raised the camera, fitted the 85mm lens, and aimed at the horizon. The craft appeared again, lower this time, its triangular bulk slicing the dawn. The windows glowed faintly, like lanterns. For the briefest second, one of the figures inside moved, just enough to suggest awareness, intent. Walter snapped the photo, heart pounding. Then something new happened. The craft tilted, slowly, deliberately, as if acknowledging him. A controlled roll, exposing its underside to the lens. For a flash, its sensor band gleamed like a ribbon, reflecting sunrise. Then, in a shimmer of bent light, it vanished into the clouds. Walter lowered the camera, breathless. It had seen him. It had chosen to show itself. When he developed the photograph later, he saw more than just the tilt. Along the craft's underside, symbols were etched, geometric patterns eerily similar to the arrowhead mark Eleanor had carved into the lens. His hands shook. Eleanor hadn't just given him a tool. She had given him a connection. Escalation. That night, the SUV returned. This time, the men didn't knock. They waited outside, headlights glaring through his window like eyes. Sheriff Delgado arrived minutes later, parking across the street, hand on her holster. "They're pushing harder," she said. "They want your lens. They want your photos. And Walter, if they don't get them politely, they'll take them another way." Walter's grip tightened on the camera. "Then we move first." Maya frowned. "Move where?" "Into the open," Walter said. His voice had the steel of a man who'd watched wars. "If Aerodyne wants to bury this, then daylight is our only weapon. Eleanor gave me this lens for a reason. She trusted me to make sure the truth wasn't erased." Delgado hesitated, then nodded slowly. "If we do this, we'll need proof. More than photographs. Something no one can deny." Walter thought of the symbols under the craft, the tilt, the deliberate flash of light, his chest filled with both dread and certainty. "Then we'll bring them to the forest, tomorrow at dawn." That's when it always comes back. The desert was still asleep when Walter left his house for what he knew might be the last time with Eleanor's lens. The old camera hung heavy around his neck, not just in weight, but in meaning. Sheriff Delgado's cruiser idled outside, headlights muted to a dull glow. Maya leaned against the hood, notebook tucked under her arm, her breath misting faintly in the cool pre-dawn air. "Ready?" she asked. Walter nodded. He didn't feel ready. His hands ached with age, his chest tightened with fear, and yet he felt Eleanor's presence like a hand on his shoulder. She had walked this far with him, through every sunrise, through every secret revealed in glass. He would walk the rest of the way for her. The three of them drove in silence to Juniper Gulch. The road was little more than a scar etched into the desert, leading them toward the forest where scorch marks still marred the earth. When they arrived, the clearing was quiet, the trees dark silhouettes against the paling horizon. They set up near the same patch of fused earth as before. Maya checked her watch. 5 minutes until the window. Walter lifted the camera, adjusted the old 85mm lens, and steadied his breath. His finger hovered above the shutter. The arrival. At first, there was nothing. Just the slow bloom of dawn, the desert stirring with bird calls. Then, faint at the edge of sight, the air shimmered. A ripple, like heat waves above asphalt, spread across the clearing. And then it was there. The triangular craft descended silently, vast and deliberate. Its edges flickered in and out of visibility, as if the world itself were trying to deny its presence. Along one side, the windows glowed softly, and behind them, the figures shifted, indistinct, yet undeniably aware. Maya whispered, "It's real. God, it's real." Sheriff Delgado's hand hovered near her sidearm, but her face betrayed awe more than fear. Walter raised the camera. Through Eleanor's lens, the craft was clearer than ever. Every seam, every surface, etched with geometric patterns. And on its underside, glowing faintly in the dawn light, were the same arrowhead symbols Eleanor had once sketched in her notes. It was as if she had signed her name across the sky. Walter's hands trembled, but he steadied himself. He pressed the shutter. Click. The sound was small, but it felt like thunder. The photograph was captured. The truth held at last. The gesture, then, something happened no one expected. The craft tilted again, just as it had days earlier. But this time, the movement was slower, almost ceremonial. Its underside faced Walter directly, and a pulse of light swept across the clearing, bathing them all in a golden shimmer. For a heartbeat, Walter felt warmth wash through him. Not heat, but a kind of recognition, as though the craft was acknowledging him, acknowledging Eleanor, acknowledging the lens that had kept their secrets safe for so long. Maya gasped. Delgado muttered a prayer under her breath. And then, just as gently as it had arrived, the craft shimmered once more and dissolved into the sky, leaving only silence and the faint scent of ozone in its wake. The aftermath. The three of them stood frozen. The clearing seemed impossibly quiet, as if the earth itself held its breath. Maya finally spoke. That was no accident. It knew we were watching. It wanted us to see. Delgado's voice was rough. Or it wanted to warn us. Either way, we can't deny it now. Walter lowered the camera slowly. His knees felt weak, but inside he felt a calm he hadn't known in years. He glanced at the photograph in the camera's display. It was perfect. The craft, the tilt, the underside glowing with Eleanor's symbol. Proof. But as he looked at it, he understood something deeper. The photograph wasn't just proof for the world. It was for him. Eleanor's work, Eleanor's voice, Eleanor's faith in him, it all lived in this single frame. A choice. Back at Walter's house, the three sat around the table. The photograph lay between them. Maya's eyes shone with urgency. We have to release this. The world deserves to know. Delgado leaned back, arms crossed. Release it. And panic spreads faster than wildfire. People riot over rumors. What do you think they'll do over this? Walter stayed silent, staring at the image. The debate swirled around him, words colliding. Truth, secrecy, safety, panic, hope. But his thoughts were elsewhere. He thought of Eleanor's last request. Bring home one beautiful thing from each morning. She hadn't said, bring home something to terrify the world. She hadn't said, make them believe. She had said, beautiful. And this photograph, strange as it was beautiful. Not because it was mysterious or dangerous, but because it was Eleanor's legacy. It was a reminder that truth, even hidden in the sky, could be carried by love. Walter smiled faintly. I'll keep it, he said softly. For now, the world will learn in its time. But this belongs to Eleanor first. To me. Maya opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. She saw the tenderness in his expression and said nothing. Delgado nodded slowly. Maybe that's best. Not all truths need to be shouted. Some just need to be kept safe. The last morning. The next day, Walter woke before dawn as always. He brewed his coffee, stepped onto the porch, and lifted the camera. The sky was streaked with the first blush of light, soft and endless. He raised the lens and snapped a photograph, not of the craft, not of secrets, but of the sky itself. Pale blue, merging into gold, clouds like brushstrokes, a hawk cutting across the horizon. When he lowered the camera, he felt Eleanor beside him, as vivid as if she'd never left. He whispered, "I brought it home, Ellie. One beautiful thing. Every morning." And for the first time in years, Walter felt. Epilogue. Weeks later, life in Red Mesa slipped back into its rhythm. Rumors still lingered, stories of UFOs, government experiments, angels in the desert, but no proof ever surfaced. Walter kept the final photograph tucked in an album, between pictures of Eleanor in her workshop and sunrises she had never lived to see. Sometimes, when the light was just right, the lens would catch a flare, and Walter liked to imagine it was Eleanor smiling at him through the glass. The sky still held its secrets, but Walter no longer needed answers. He had what he'd been promised: beauty, truth, and the love of a woman who had made sure neither could ever be hidden completely. On his final entry in the ledger, Walter wrote only 3 words beneath the date: "One beautiful thing."